Welcome. We will start on time, and I hope we will end on time as well. My name is Steve Hamilton. I'm moderating this session, and I've decided to have each one of the speakers introduce him or herself so that their introduction and their presentation go together instead of being separated. And I will start off by giving a kind of overview of the topic. I need to congratulate you for attending the session on the most important part of the whole Pathways process, work-based learning. That's my biased opinion. I've asked, and we had a telephone conference before, and we've agreed to try to touch on three different points: the value of work-based learning, who benefits and how; the quality of work-based learning, what are the principles and the practices that define quality; and scale. How do we make high-quality work-based learning experiences available for many instead of the few, which is the way it works now. And I've asked each one of the speakers to relate those questions to their own work and their own personal experience. But I'd like to come back to those questions as we go into the discussion period and focus them on the call to action. What do you think we can and should do? Who should do it? And how do we move forward from here? So that's where I'd like us at 5:30 to be able to walk out with some ideas about those questions. Let me give a brief definition of work-based learning. I view it as opportunities for youth to learn in a workplace or work-like setting as part of their education. Adults can have work-based learning too, but we're interested in young people. It can take place in a variety of different contexts. The workplace is an obvious one. That could include internships, cooperative education, apprenticeship, job shadowing, field trips, youth jobs, and subsidized employment training. But also in work-like experiences. Service learning is one of those. Youth enterprise is another. Project-based learning, which is widely used independently of career and technical education, is another that I think counts. Work-based learning is valuable because young people can learn about work. They learn specific work-related skills. They also learn more general cognitive competencies, intrapersonal competencies, and interpersonal competencies. But young people also learn from work. They learn, for example, how to work with decimals and negative numbers if they're auto mechanics, making adjustments. Work-based learning provides an alternative, hands-on form of learning for young people who may not have learned what they should have learned in school. The Germans have a term for these young people. It's school-weary youth. And they pay particular attention to young people who are just tired of being in school and create alternatives for them. I would go through my criteria for high-quality work-based learning, but then I would be setting a bad example for my colleagues by going over my time. So instead of that, I'll turn it over to Reggie Newson from Wisconsin.
Well, thank you very much, Steve. I really appreciate that, and good afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon.
I'm Reggie Newson, and I'm the Secretary for the Wisconsin Department of Workforce Development. The Wisconsin Department of Workforce Development is the lead state agency in Governor Walker's cabinet that has the responsibility for developing, building, and strengthening the state's workforce. We have over 1,600 employees at the Department of Workforce Development and a $450 million budget. And we oversee several programs: unemployment insurance, voc rehab, employment and training, workers' compensation, and others. And I'm very pleased to be here to talk a little bit about Wisconsin, because Wisconsin, for many of you know this, that Wisconsin has a rich history and tradition of apprenticeship. Wisconsin was the first state to organize apprenticeship in the nation in 1911. And our youth apprenticeship program was profiled in the Prosperities Report, Pathways Prosperity Report. So I'm very pleased to share a little bit about Wisconsin, what we're doing here. We have a great partnership in the state of Wisconsin with employers, K through 12, our individual technical colleges, and universities. And we have a lot of best-in-class models and pockets of excellence throughout the state of Wisconsin in various regions. And I wanted to take the opportunity in my comments to highlight one program or model that I think is an outstanding model that the Department of Workforce Development under Governor Walker's leadership will be continuing to build and scale up over the next several years. And you should have this in your handouts here. And the model I'm going to talk about is Second Chance Partners for Education. And I'll just walk through this here. Second Chance Partners for Education is a non-for-profit organization in the state of Wisconsin that have started to develop pathways in education and work-based learning. Since 2000, this partnership has successfully had evidence-based outcomes where it's worked with employers on the ground to engage employers to develop curriculum and education and training based on specific employer needs. It's very customized, this model. And in partnership with K through 12 and the technical colleges in Wisconsin, this model is continuing to develop individuals. It's a unique model for success. In terms of immersion, Second Chance Partner is a service provider that works underneath individual consortiums in the state of Wisconsin. Each year, the state of Wisconsin has grant money, almost $2 million of grants that we administer statewide to individual consortiums regionally in the state of Wisconsin. And these consortiums are led by employers. And currently, Second Chance Partners is a subcontractor of individual school districts and employers that provides this work-based learning. As I mentioned, that this model correlates this training customized based on individual employer needs. And it's built a tremendous partnership with over 80 employers in the state of Wisconsin. And the individual specific focus of their training is in manufacturing, advanced manufacturing. Wisconsin is a manufacturing state, one of the highest manufacturing states per capita in the nation. So that's where we hang our hat on, is manufacturing. And students in this partnership work hands-on in business environments. They're integrated into the companies, individual companies, to learn. Many of the modules and the curriculum and the training that's provided by the companies and the students are done by individual shop managers, plant managers, and production managers, in consultation with individuals that's trained to provide direct curriculum training. The partnership, individual school districts in the state of Wisconsin, is very rigorous. The training that it provides relevant experience in this business environment. The class size is 8 to 1, and this is very, very specific and important because it allows for this personalized learning model to be enacted. Each student in the Second Chance Partner program has to develop something called academic and career learning plans or individual learning plans. So as they start the program, they sit down with the instructor, the parent, the guidance counselor, the teacher at the school, and the guardian sits down and develops this individualized learning plan where they go through a process and determine each step of the way the things that they'll be doing. Evidence-based outcomes, a history of success, 168 graduates to date, currently 130 individuals enrolled, and this is regionalized right now in Wisconsin and one of our regions in the southeastern and northeastern part of the state. There are 13 education centers in these two regions housed inside the company, on the shop floor. There are 80 business partners, 36 high school partners, and again, this evidence-based outcome of success, 90% of the individuals that go through this program graduate, and it has a high attendance rate, and also individuals that go through this program graduate, they either go on and matriculate at a technical college, into an adult apprenticeship program, or they go to work at the individual company. And the funding is provided by school districts, business partners, donations and grants, and also last week, just Friday, and you'll see this in the press release in the packet, the Department of Workforce Development announced that Second Chance Partners will be able to be their own individual curriculum consortium where they can go directly to the state and to apply for this grant money to be able to expand and scale this program statewide. And again, in terms of program design, what makes this unique is that, again, the education center is housed inside the company. The training is provided by an individual person that's trained by Second Chance Partner and a shop floor manager or a supervisor or production manager. They spend 2 hours a day going through curriculum such as math, science, social sciences, financial literacy. They learn blueprint reading, how to read a ruler, and CAD and some other things. And then the other 6 hours of the day, they spend on the shop floor working underneath a mentor, actual doing production work, learning how to do the production work of the individual company. These individuals, starting their junior and senior year, is a 21-month program, and they rotate from company to company into business partners. So they start off and they spend several weeks at one company, they rotate to another company, and they learn based on what that company's individual needs are on the floor, learning how to do the work. They're paid, they make a wage based on the skill set commensurate with their training and what they're developing. The outcomes, the end game of this is that they get a high school diploma. They also have the opportunity to have transcripted credits underneath their belt. They can transfer, if they choose, to go on to a technical college. They already have that underneath their belt. They have 21 months of real world life work experience that is technical skills, which is very, very significant. They also get a credential and certification. And again, they have mentors that they can go back to in terms of being able to continue to develop. You see some vignettes of individuals that have gone through this program too, young people that have gone through this program inside the packet that talks about their experience, as well as the employer. One of the partner employers that also talks about their experience in this program. And again, the end game for the employer is that the employer has opportunity to train an individual, and once the individual comes out, many of the employers offer these young people jobs, making family supporting wages, and it gets a pathway for them into the middle class. No debt for these individual young people, because they graduate from high school, they have a job available for them, and if they choose to, they can go on to the technical college and start an apprenticeship. So that's Second Chance Partners in a nutshell. And again, I appreciate the opportunity to dialogue more about work-based initiatives in Wisconsin.
Hey, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Hans Meeder with the National Center for College and Career Transitions. We're an organization that focuses on helping regions, community leadership partnerships develop career pathway systems and doing research on what's happening around the country related to that, and then technical assistance as well. How many of you at the age 16 knew what you wanted to do for a living in the future? Anyone? Anyone? 2, 3, 4. Okay. Most of us were clueless and happy to be a little clueless. The Gallup organization says that most young people have 2 objectives that they would like to see for their life. And I was thinking back recently when a person from Gallup described this, and I was just thinking I had no recollection of having any career aspirations. Most young people, their aspirations are to have a good job and to have a happy family. And that resonated because in general, that's exactly where I was at that stage. What I'm going to talk to just for a few minutes, though, is how do young people make more specific decisions than that very general, I want to have a good job and have a good family. And last week, I had the opportunity to be in a Southwest city and interview, over a 5-day period, about 50 teachers, 50 counselors, about 100 9th and 10th graders, and then 11th and 12th graders. And as I was talking to those students, repeatedly I asked them, do you have anyone that's ever come into your school and talked about their work in the professional world, or have you ever left this campus and gone and seen a real work site or seen someone? These were 90% students from low-income Hispanic families whose parents were pretty much had not graduated from high school and were doing pretty low-skilled labor. And out of that group of 100 students, probably about 7 students at most had ever had an organized experience where they had left campus or someone had come on to the campus. And then even those cases, they were really other colleges that were looking to recruit students into their trade schools. This issue is so important. I think work-based learning might fall into that broader category of young people connecting to the real world. And how can we expect any young person, particularly a young person from a very isolated experience, to develop a sense of personal passion and purpose? And that's really what work-based learning in the broader umbrella of real-world experiences gives students. So we've been doing research on some really interesting examples in New York as well as other places. So I wanted to just share a couple of those really quickly. One is a specialty school in New York City called the High School for Computers and Technology. They serve about 400 students in the Upper Bronx, and I got to take the subway all through the city one day and just saw really Pandora's box of different personalities and lifestyles. And so getting students with real-world experience in the Upper Bronx is no easy task. And what they've done, they have created computer labs at senior centers and at libraries where the students are doing real coaching and e-mentoring for, not virtual mentoring, but actually being there as a computer mentor for senior citizens and for children. They also, within the school itself, run a help center for the other small schools that are kind of co-located in this large building, as well as some other high schools in the district. Those are kind of their premier computer technology students. And then some students are also doing work-based internships at the local Staples. So there's 3 or 4 Staples shops that are engaging these students for about a 6-week period of internships. And so that is, really on the ground, real-world experience that these students are getting. A similar project called the Academy for Television and Film over in Queens, New York, provides a similar 6-week experience for the students. And what they get to do is go work in prop houses, work in television and film production studios, work in costume houses, work in sound rental units. So they're getting kind of an internship experience that is supervised, and it does relate to what they're learning in school. But then they've also created their own enterprise called Next Step Productions to work with the local nonprofit sector. And they do video productions, things to put on the internet for these nonprofits. And what they found is that they're not only doing the technical production, they're actually doing the full script writing, concept development, things that are pretty complex thinking skills for a young person to do. They're getting a very rich experience, and typically these are seniors that are doing this work, and they're getting to provide a management leadership experience to the younger students that are part of that as well. Yep. So then the last thing I just want to comment on is that as good as work-based learning is, most importantly is we need to think about an infrastructure for business involvement, which is much broader than just work-based learning experiences. There's at least 9 types of activities that we've identified that typically go on when you have a really strong employer education involvement. And to create that infrastructure, you have to have a strong advisory committee process. My colleague Brett Pawlowski and I have co-written a book that ACTE published called Building Advisory Boards That Matter. And we lay out the whole process. For a lot of people, such as the ones I visited this last week, they've never run a successful employer advisory committee. And this is kind of a very nuts and bolts, plain spoken how-to to get that up and running. So that's what I think in terms of scalability. We can have these great individual examples, but we have to build the infrastructure for engaging employers with our schools on multiple levels on an ongoing basis. So thank you.
You might have to use a hook. My name is Mike Wiggins. I'm Executive Vice President, Southwire Company, Carrollton, Georgia. And I'm incredibly happy to be here. That's all I want to say about me, because I want to talk about Tour for Life. First, we made the decision about 30 years ago that we would not hire any employee, from a janitor to whomever, that did not have a high school education or a GED, and it shook the foundation of our county. But we've held to that, and we've been through a lot of economic cycles, a lot of happenings over time, and sometimes it was hard to do, but we've held our ground. A couple of years ago, late 06, think about the economy in those days, 05, 06, it was booming, and we couldn't make enough stuff. We make wire and cable from the point of generation to these lights or the light switches in your home and anything in between, so long as it carries electricity. So we were going gangbusters. And then all of a sudden, what happened? The bottom fell out, and we live and die by construction. And we really had to think hard about all the strategies, all the things that we were doing. In the middle of all of that, we decided to take a whole nother look at our employee base, the skills that we needed, and 12 for Life was born. 12 for Life means just that. You get 12 years, meaning of education, and you'll have a shot at a better life. And 12 for Life is a real live manufacturing plant, staffed 100% by at-risk high school kids. The only adults there are supervisors and a plant manager, and the plant manager's cohort is Dr. Doug Wright, who is a member of Carroll County Board of Education. It's a really cool thing. You ought to come to Carrollton and see it. 92,000 square feet. We opened the doors in January the 4th, 2007 with 69 kids. Today we have 195, and we've actually built a school inside 12 for Life. Some kids go to work. We run 3 4-hour shifts. Some kids go to work, and then they come to school. Some kids go to school, then they go to work. The ones that are most behind go to school for an entire school day, and then work the evening shift from 5:30 to 9:30. And to date, we've got 429 graduates. We believe we'll have 509 come graduation day in 2013. And if we think about our schools, that's about a school and a half of our largest school in Carroll County, Georgia, that we have put into the ranks of the graduated seniors as opposed to a dropout. How do I know that they're dropouts, would have been dropouts? The criteria for coming to 12 for Life is, number one, you got to be 16 and in school. We do not go to the streets to look for dropouts. You got to be 16 and in school. Number 2 criteria is you got to be flunking. You're not going to graduate. Number 3 is you got to be socioeconomically disadvantaged. And we don't deal with, well, my kid is this and I had bad luck. If you're on free or reduced lunches, that puts you in the pool. And that's how we differentiate on whether or not you're socioeconomically disadvantaged. Number 4 is attendance. But it's not what you think. It's poor attendance. We try to get the kids with poor attendance, because if you run a business, you know that that's the number one problem you got, and I'm going to bet that's true with your business. I'm going to bet it's also true with your school or your university or your technical college or whatever it is, getting kids or adults, whomever, to come to work. So that's what we start with. We start with 100% failures, and out of that we've got, hopefully by the end of this year, 509. So I want to stress that what I'm about here is not selling. Well, I do want to sell you something, except I don't want dollars. 12 for Life is not for sale. 12 for Life, we'll give it to you and even help you do it, because we know that this will work. We've proven that it'll work, and it'll do something about the fix that the country's in. It'll certainly do something about education. We've raised the graduation rate in our county by 10 percentage points. I'm not saying 12 for Life did all that, but a good chunk. More importantly, of at-risk kids, we've raised the graduation rate in our county from 55% to 75%. I'd bet that's unheard of. So give me a call. Come see me in Carrollton, Georgia. I'll be happy to talk with you about it, and if you're not careful, I'll have you really sold. Thank you.
Great.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Philomena, and I'm the Senior Vice President at Northeastern University. And it's just a pleasure to be with you today. So Northeastern, how many of you know Northeastern University? So part of the room. Northeastern is a private research comprehensive university in Boston, and for 115 years since our founding, we've been doing work-based learning, and we call it the co-op program, our signature cooperative education program at Northeastern. We are a highly selective university in all sorts of traditional terms, in terms of admit rates and selectivities and ranking in traditional educational terms. So one might say, why work-based learning? And it is something that we believe very deeply in. Since our founding, and I think in many ways our founding was to happen on a model for very pragmatic reasons, the private university alternative, and students needed period of work between their period of learning in order to earn. And finding really the power of that model to enhance the academic experience. So today, we have over 29,500 students, 16,000 undergraduates. The remainder are at the graduate, master, doctoral level, law school, 94 undergraduate programs, and 169 graduate programs. And virtually all of our undergraduate students, upwards of 90%, do experiential learning, and most of them do co-op. Through the last 2 decades, we have broadened our co-op experience to include a number of other experiential learning vehicles, everything from undergraduate research to dialogues in civilization, which is group experiences in various countries, to more structured service learning. But virtually all of our students graduate, usually with 12 months or more. The periods of time that students do is about a 6-month period in between traditional academic terms. If they choose to be in school, an undergraduate, for 5 years, then they will traditionally get 18 months of cooperative education experience or another form of experiential learning. 4 years, they will typically get a year or 12 months. And many of these programs overlap the summer period. From an employer perspective, they get coverage, if you will, in their professional positions in the corporation for a full 12 months. So we're not a summer internship program, but we use the full academic calendar for our experiences. I know as we get into the conversation on value, I'll be able to share much of what we've found through the years, but simply said, we found it's extremely powerful in terms of the academic enrichment in traditional academic terms, critical thinking skills. It's extremely powerful in terms of finding your way to the right career, because students can test out 2 or 3 different opportunities or avenues, or they can deepen their experience in a single avenue. In the last several years, we have focused on a global model for cooperative learning and experiential learning. So today we are in 92 different countries, and we've had to build an infrastructure to not support students just locally as they go out to work, but globally as they go out to work. And we feel it's absolutely essential that our graduates come with a kind of skills that not only enable them to enter the work world and be successful and progress, but enter it on a global stage in terms of the kind of multinational businesses that our corporate communities represent. So with that, I'll save the other remarks to the questions that we'll have an opportunity to answer. Thank you for having me here.
Good afternoon. I'm Grace Sue. I am a manager for education programs at IBM in our Corporate Citizenship and Corporate Affairs Department. We have at IBM a very dynamic education portfolio, and I think one of the most exciting projects that we've launched recently is PTech, or Pathways of Technology Early College High School, that you might have heard the President Obama talk about in the State of the Union address this year. PTech is more than just a high school. It's a 9 to 14 school model that we've developed in partnership with the New York City Department of Education, the City University of New York City College of Technology for our school PTech in Brooklyn, New York, and now with our partners in Chicago Public Schools, City Colleges of Chicago, and Richard J. Daley College. And our school in Chicago is the Sarah E. Good STEM Academy. The goal of our school is that students will graduate with an associate's in applied sciences degree that will enable them to enter a job into the IT industry or go on and finish their studies in a post-secondary institution. Our commitment for every child within the walls of our school is that they are going to graduate with an AAS degree within 6 years. And our scope and sequence has been designed so that high school and college are seamlessly integrated. So some students, we know, depending upon their strengths and weaknesses, will be able to graduate within 4 years, and the majority of kids will probably need the entire 6 years to graduate. One important thing about our school is that it is a public school. It's open to all students. There's no testing or grade requirements. And as part of that, an important part of that is that we have a real dedication to opening access to historically underserved children. And as part of that as well, we've made the associate's degree free for all students. An important part of the strand, because IBM has committed to making all of the students of our schools first in line for jobs at IBM, and to make that have real resonance and meaning for the kids, we have a very strong workplace learning component. And I want to talk about workplace experiences really within a workplace learning strand, because that's a core strand within our school. It resonates through from grade 9 through 14. Our workplace learning strand has a scope and sequence. So it's scaffolded. It begins with a course in the 9th grade. It begins with mentoring. Every child at PTech and in Chicago has an IBM mentor who provides them with academic and career guidance. And so right now we have 2 years of students in Brooklyn and 1 year of students in Chicago. And beginning in year 3 in Brooklyn, New York, we're going to begin community service-based internships for students. And then in year 4, they're actually going to go out on real internships, solving problems at places like IBM and other companies, and they'll be paid for their work. And the idea is that they're going to be able to showcase their skills, but also be able to push the envelope on their skills. And ultimately, we want them to be, at the end of their time at PTech, be in a full-blown apprenticeship, which will provide them with job experience, but also the supports back at school that they need to succeed. When PTech kids graduate, we really want them to be a triple threat. They're going to have the academic skills, the technical skills, and the workplace skills that they need to succeed once they leave. The workplace learning strand is so important at PTech because when you're 14 years old, 6 years in a really rigorous model where you have to take pre-calculus and calculus in order to graduate with degrees in computer information systems or electromechanical engineering technology, that's a really long haul. And workplace learning helps them see the relevance. It helps them keep their eyes on the ball. They have a mentor who's there to encourage and support them. So that strand is incredibly important. And at PTech, we have a 94% attendance rate. And anybody who knows Brooklyn, we're in the Crown Heights section, which is a pretty tough neighborhood in Brooklyn. And in Chicago, we have a 98% attendance rate. So I think, the workplace learning, and the relevance and the culture that's being built at these schools is driving these kids to help them understand why they're there and why they're working so hard, because we also have extended day and extended year. And the other things that, in terms of quality, in addition to the scope and sequence and having a very structured and supported workplace learning experience, we do a lot of PD. We know that teachers don't necessarily understand what it means to be in the IT industry. Is it sitting around like I do on the phone all day, sitting in my cubicle? It's not. It's working with dynamic systems. It's working with computers. And the opportunity to get them out there and see what manufacturing sites are like, talking to people in those jobs that their students are going to get is really important. So the PD piece is really critical for us. In addition, once our kids go out on internships, we know that not all internships are created the same. And it's important for employers to have PD as well. People at IBM need to know how to work with young people who are highly skilled. And so we're working with Jobs for the Future now to develop a handbook that we can pass out to potential employers, whether they're in a local Brooklyn neighborhood or at IBM. And then finally, I know there's just been a lot of talk about how you get models like this out to broader audiences, and it's certainly great to be mentioned in the State of the Union address because everybody calls and wants to know more. And then we've replicated in Chicago, and now Governor Cuomo is replicating in 10 schools in New York, which is really exciting. IBM is going to be the lead industry partner for 2 of those schools. And we've also developed what we call, in shorthand, a playbook, which you can get off of citizenibm.com. The devil's in the details about how to start programs like these. They sound great, and everybody shares the vision and the mission, but doing the work is the really hard part. So getting best practices out and sharing information is really critical.
No, I can't do it. I thought it would appropriate a microphone. This is really exciting. I would like to start at the other end of the table and focus on the issue. By the way, we're going to talk among ourselves for a little while and then invite you to join us. So if you get impatient, start waving your hand or something. Philly, what defines a high-quality co-op for Northeastern? You've been doing it for a long time. You obviously don't just send your students out to do anything. How do you choose their placements?
Yeah. So just to give you some sort of scale, which I didn't do in my comments, we do about 7,500 co-ops per year, about 2,900 employers that are in our employer network. So part of it is really the infrastructure to create clarity in the job, the competencies that the employer is looking for, what the student is really going to engage in. And then we do what we call really leveling that job as, if you're thinking about an undergraduate, what kinds of readiness the student will have to carry, let's say, for an engineering co-op, sort of a level 1, level 2, and level 3 experience. So it's all about the competencies as it relates specifically to the field, but also some of the soft skills, the teamwork, the way in which they will function within the management team, and then the responsibilities. I mean, simply said, we look for real responsibilities, that if the student was coming in as a full-time 6-month, that they're really replacing what a professional employee will do in that role or supplementing. And many times the employers are looking at this as a way, particularly in areas like the STEM fields, to really test drive the student as an employee and to really know if they're going to put an offer on the table, what they have. So by really doing the work up front, the job evaluation, the clarity at role and responsibility, the evaluation afterwards by student and employer, it really is a system that enables the student to be, the student learning to be really a part of the work-based learning.
Others, same question?
One thing that IBM has done, which I think is sort of the foundational piece to work-based learning, as we did, is what we call skills mapping. So we looked at all the skills that were required for jobs that could be filled by someone with an associate's in applied science degree. And then we took those skills, and there were some 9,000 of them, and we boiled them down. We took out ones that were IBM only, and tried to generalize them across the IT field. And then we worked with our high school and college faculty to map those skills to the curriculum, to ensure that when the students went through their academic training and their technical training, that when they came out, they were going to have the skills that businesses actually needed. And that work has served as a foundational piece for the entire program, because in addition to technical skills that IBM needs, there's a lot of workplace learning skills that are across the field, from all the ones that everybody knows: critical thinking, problem solving, flexibility, adaptability. Those are the things that often are the difference between a successful employee who can go up a career ladder and someone who doesn't make it. So that has been something really core that I think businesses need to think about, because this is really, I think to some degree, this has been somewhat of a push model where education pushes kids up to business, but businesses also need to reach down and pull. They need to pull the kids up based upon the skills that they need, and it really is a two-way street.
So one of the examples I'll share from the Academy of Television and Film is I'm really impressed by the analysis that was just described. So this is kind of more the human side of it. Andy Lastman, who's the work-based learning coordinator at the TV and Film Academy, a couple days before the student goes on their first internship, he goes with that student navigating the public transportation system to get to the workplace in the right door to the right room. Just so there's no kind of like, I couldn't find it, I didn't go, which is, they've had that happen. So that's one of the lessons they've learned is, being a little over the top in terms of that hand-holding for the teenagers. He'll also have very much the one-on-one discussions at each of the work sites to take a look at it, both for safety and supervision, and to make sure that they're going to have that real activity that is meaningful and appropriate for their age. And then he will, once every few weeks, show up on site, watch the student doing their work. Every week, the employee sponsor fills out a short form and emails it back to him, just saying, this is what we worked on during this week. So there's multiple points of touch so that the employers don't feel that they're kind of on their own, but they're really getting that interaction with the school to make sure that they're on track and that the student's on track.
I think it's making sure that the young people can apply what they learn in a real-life work experience and work setting. The Second Chance Partner model allows young people to be able to do that. There's another model in the state of Wisconsin, a school district in Elva, Wisconsin, and young people in the school district have started their own company. They started their own manufacturing company where they go through the whole nuts and bolts in this experience of manufacturing, from supplies, ordering inventory, first in, first out. And what they do is they develop contracts, and they have contracts with individual employers in the area, and they develop products for these companies, and they're paid to develop this work. And the work that comes in from the contract, they use it to sustain the company. So they use it to purchase supplies, and they pay the students and the workers, and they do payroll and everything. So again, this is applied learning in the real world setting, and I think that's really important in terms of assessing the quality of a work-based learning experience.
I'd like to call attention to a term that I've heard, especially from Grace, curriculum, which we think of as applying to the classroom. It applies in the workplace as well. We're not talking about just sending kids out and hoping for the best. We need to plan and structure the learning experience in the workplace just as we do in the classroom. I want to carry that a little further. The difference, in my view, between an internship and apprenticeship has to do with duration and the difference between standardization and customization. Internships tend to be created the way you've heard by going to one employer, figuring out what they can offer, matching that with one student, and then it happens. Apprenticeships are standardized. They're the same for everybody who's in the same career area. That has some limitations. It's stricter, but it has some advantages. In Germany, companies have to qualify to be able to train apprentices. And they're very proud when they are recognized as being high enough quality to be allowed to train apprentices. If a company's apprentices fail the examination that they take at the middle and the end of their apprenticeship term, first of all, the company has to start paying them as if they had passed, and then give them enough supplemental training so they can pass the next time they take it. And if this continues to happen, the company gets decertified. They can't do it anymore. Sorry, you're not good enough. A very different orientation than we have, where I've been in this position. I know some of you have. You're begging employers, won't you please take a student or two? And I'm not saying we need to be at that level, but it's useful to have that kind of an orientation. We think about how do we design a learning experience in a workplace. Which leads me to a question about scale, and that is employer involvement. Mike, I'd be interested in a little more from you and then from others. Why would employers make the investment? Why would employers use their own resources to work with people that they know can't do the job they want them to do? They need to make the investment to bring them up to that level.
Did I mention that Tour for Life is profitable? So selfishly, I mentioned it from the outset that we needed a workforce and we needed an applicant pool. That's why we started. What we had no idea would happen is Tour for Life became profitable. And that's very, very key to all the things that we talk about, because at the end of the day, things that are not profitable, they become non-sustainable. And they're the first thing that gets cut when times get tough. I know about having to make a profit, so Tour for Life is profitable. On the other side, there's, in the course of the meetings and the presentations I've heard today, there's a lot of comments about skin in the game. We partnered with Carroll County Schools. It's a real partnership. Most people throw that term around and don't have a clue what it really, really means. This is real. Our board of directors for Tour for Life is about half Carroll County Schools and half Southwire. Now we're touching kids from, or getting kids from 7 different schools, counting the one that we've got internal at Southwire. So a lot going on, but you can do that when you put something together that is profitable. The internship golly, I don't have a clue how many interns we got. It'd probably scare me to death if I knew. Probably 100, 150, but we do interns. We bring kids in. Just a few of them are Tour for Life kids who have graduated from Tour for Life, but we use a lot of college interns, and they just work at Southwire. They work alongside engineers, they work alongside salespeople, they work alongside finance people, they work inside HR, they just do a job. And we wind up probably hiring 50% of them. We have 3 division HR managers in the company. All 3 of them came through the internship.
Grace, why did IBM get involved in this PTech?
Well, IBM has always been a leading corporate citizen, we have a real feeling of social responsibility, and what can we contribute to the communities where we live and work. At the same time, there's a real economic reason for it. We can't have a strong business if we're in a failing community, and you can't have a strong community without successful schools. And we all know the data. There's going to be 14 million jobs in the next 10 years, and who's going to fill them? I think at IBM also we understand that The most innovative companies are ones that embrace a diversity of people, a diversity of thoughts, and we need to cultivate that. We need to embrace that and cultivate that in order to continue to lead in the IT industry.
Okay. Hans, you talked about the need for an infrastructure. When you work with associations of employers, what's your sense of what drives them, why they're willing to come together and again commit resources to work as a group on work-based learning?
Thanks. One of the really glowing examples of business involvement, is anyone in here from Nashville, Tennessee? Okay, there you go. Stand up. Let's applaud. So the Nashville, Tennessee school district has done a really intensive work to implement pathways. They call them the Academies of Nashville in all 15 of their high schools, wall-to-wall, relevant learning experiences for all their young people. And a big part of that has been building this infrastructure. So instead of every individual school kind of trying to figure out business involvement and creating those partnerships from scratch, they've created, I think they call them industry partnership councils, 5 of them, that really look at the key sectors in the Nashville region. It's quite pretty big geographic spread. And those partnership councils sit at kind of a mid-tier of a 3-part industry structure they have. And that's really kind of where the strategic decisions about all the academies are made and how to get business people involved on an ongoing basis. Then each of the academies at the school level also has an advisory committee. And then they have kind of at the high level, what they call the CEO committee, which is the mayor and the school superintendent and CEOs from several large corporations. And that's really kind of the visibility and the advocacy structure that gives the credence to the overall work and keeps it moving. And a really important example of this was when they were going through their first big superintendent search a couple years ago. The business community stepped forward. They had just started doing the academy work, and the business community stepped forward and said, we have to have our next superintendent be a believer in this and an advocate for this, so that the work that was already happening didn't get undone. And we know in education, basically, every time there's a leadership change, everything is put on the table and is at risk. So the business community infrastructure is really what protects and pushes the momentum forward. And so they also have an organization called the Pencil Foundation, which automates a lot of the business involvement. When they need a volunteer to come into a program, they kind of post a job opening, a volunteer opening, and then the other side of it, all the business volunteers sign up for what they're interested in, and then there's a matchmaking role. Okay, they need someone to go in and talk about engineering to a group of students for a half hour next Wednesday. So they've kind of automated as much of that as possible, which allows you to start to get to the scale you're going to need to have. The other thing if you wouldn't mind, I just comment. I think this idea of return on investment for all of our stakeholders is really important. And one of the things that the Nashville Chamber of Commerce Leadership Committee told me when I first got there was this idea that we really want our community to be healthy. We want a place where we can recruit our executives, and they're going to want to send their kids to public schools. They're going to feel good about the community. So it wasn't all just about a direct line into their workforce, even though that's part of it, but it was also about the general notion. So I think every probably business partner has a slightly different sense of what's in it for me. And it's really important that the educators work with them to pull that out, so you articulate what's the return on investment that everyone's trying to get out of this arrangement. No one will do it just because, I mean, some people are maybe thoroughly good-hearted, but most of us want a little bit of return on investment. And so if everyone, particularly the teachers and the counselors as well, what's the return on investment for me in the long run of doing this reform effort? I think that's really a valuable thing to consider.
Reggie, you mentioned that Wisconsin has a long tradition of apprenticeship, but you've also had some pretty volatile politics. Why do political leaders support this kind of a commitment at the state level?
Well, simply put, I think workforce development and education, developing the future workforce, is a bipartisan issue. There are no such thing as a Republican job or a Democratic job. They're jobs. And hopefully they're family-supporting middle-class jobs that continue to sustain the economy. And in Wisconsin, the leadership on both sides of the aisle see that. Just last week, the Governor Walker, signed a bipartisan piece of legislation called the Wisconsin Fast Forward legislation. And this legislation allows Wisconsin to model other programs such as Louisiana with their Quick Start and Georgia Quick Start and Texas programs to provide customized worker training based on employers' needs, with the employers being in the lead in terms of developing curriculum and consortiums with other stakeholders such as the technical colleges and K through 12 to be able to put packages together to be able to get incumbent workers trained for the replacement jobs that we have now, but the jobs of the future, and be able to entice new companies to come to Wisconsin to create jobs. So this is a bipartisan piece of legislation. It also, I know the governor from Oklahoma talked about the labor market information system, and actually the Oklahoma labor market information system is a very good one that we've studied, and there's dollars available in this legislation at the governor's side, bipartisan support both in the state Senate. It passed unanimously, and it was almost unanimous consent in our House of Representatives in the state of Wisconsin. And this labor market information system will allow Wisconsin to do what Oklahoma governor talked about, doing a better job of connecting job seekers to jobs, providing real labor market information, and make informed decisions for all the stakeholders in Wisconsin that are involved in workforce and education. So we see it as a bipartisan effort, and we're going to continue to work on that. And I just wanted to piggyback a little bit on the last question about what's in it for employers and why employers want to do this. And in the packet, I had a testimonial from a company that we were at last week, Lakeside Manufacturing. It's a mid-sized manufacturer in West Allis, West Milwaukee, that as a supplier and manufacturers electronic parts. And it's simply put for them that they need workers, and it's a skills gap. And they need workers. They need to be able to get the workers skilled and trained. And if they can continue to develop the workforce, get the workers that they need, they can add additional workers and bring on additional jobs, and there's an ancillary effect for other employers and other industries in Wisconsin. So again, everyone acting on a light and self-interest, this is good for employers to be able to step up to develop their workforce, because they need to develop their workforce and have succession planning, because there's a seasoned workforce that's going to be leaving the marketplace over the next 10 years. And if employers are not stepping up to the plate right now to deal with it, we're going to have a serious crisis on our hands. So for employers, it's simple. They get the workers that they need, they get them trained the way they need them to be trained, and they can bring them on and be prosperous and continue to grow their companies.
The floor is open now. We have a microphone. If you can't wait patiently for it, speak very loudly.
I'm excited to hear about the program in Wisconsin, Second Chance Partners, and Mike, your program, 12 for Life, is also fascinating. And they're both programs for disengaged youth. And if I understand what that means is you've got to be, Mike, you said flunking, poor attendance, all these things. So if I've got a 15-year-old who's in school and by the seat of his pants not doing any work, but he's maintaining his D average and C minus average, he's coming to school every day because his mother's making him come to school. What's the opportunity for him? It seems to me the opportunity for him is to start flunking his exams, stop coming to school, and try to get into a program like yours.
It's hard to do that, though, if you meet the economic requirements. We did not develop the criteria. The Carroll County Schools developed the criteria. We didn't want to determine the size of the pool. We wanted to take the kids from the pool that they developed. And remarkably, the population of 12 for Life looks a lot like the community in terms of male, female, black, white. Looks a lot like the community. But the school system developed the rubric.
My concern is that you need to have gotten yourself out of the system before you can take advantage of something as great as 12 for Life. There's nothing like this in the mainstream for the kids who are in school.
Well, we do. I'm hesitant. I'm hesitant to, because this is a whole nother thing. We've got another program for the other end of the scale. And that's a delicate balance that we have to walk. But it's called the Southwire Engineering Academy. We've got 24 kids in it. And there are no socioeconomic requirements for that, but there is a GPA and there is a top of the top of the top. So that's, and now because of that, we're going back and adding, which is one of the reasons we built a school inside Tour for Life, because we're going to add STEM initiatives for those kids as well, to bring them a whole nother level of training, a whole nother level of education. Actually, we're building a Southwire Quality Lab, and the kids love it. And one of the teachers was going over some of the physical characteristics of copper and aluminum the other day, and the kids got into it, and they were putting their database together, and the teacher said, "You just did a physics class, and you didn't even know it." So we're doing a whole range of things, but today's conference was Tour for Life. I was invited here to talk about Tour for Life, but we got the bases covered.
In terms of Second Chance Partners, yes, Second Chance Partners right now as a model is set up for at-risk youth or youth that are disengaged currently in high school. And boy, once they're engaged in this model, they take off. But the principles of this model can be applied to young people that are not necessarily at risk. Once we can expose them to these opportunities and get them thinking about what they want to do, that's why I mentioned the academic and career learning plan component with Second Chance is so important. And something that we're doing in the state of Wisconsin that the governor has put in his budget is to develop academic and career learning plans throughout the state of Wisconsin as soon as 6th grade. And there are school districts in Wisconsin, again, pockets of school districts throughout the state that are already doing this, but it's not uniform and it's not consistent. So what the governor wants to do and what we're attempting to do now is to make this a uniform, consistent approach for every young person starting as soon as 6th grade in the state of Wisconsin will sit down in the process, parents, guardians, teachers, guidance counselors, sit down, do an assessment of interest areas, and based on that, start thinking about this roadmap of things they should be taking in high school and beyond high school, so when they graduate, they have all kind of choices to be able to go, whether it's technical college, they already got transcripted in, credits in place and dual enrollment. If they want to go on to the university, get a 4-year degree, that's great. If they want to go to work, that's great too. They've already done the things. They've got in co-ops, internships, or youth apprenticeships, so they already have that work experience in place to be able to do these things. And again, that's something that we're going to be focused on, these academic and career learning plans. And again, it's all about informed choices and also about financial aid, sitting down and doing the financial aid piece so they can afford post-secondary training. So the principles for this model, even though it's at risk currently, can be utilized, and our intent and our goal would be to take this model and start exposing young people across the board to these opportunities.
If I can just comment on that, I think that's a really good point. I appreciate you bringing that up. That often some of the best opportunities are for the students who are very marginal. But when we look at the overall national data on student hope and engagement, elementary kids are pretty engaged in school, middle school kids are getting less engaged, and then at the high school level, it's about 40% engaged. So the real issue we have is engagement, and we know students who are academically pretty well put together, but their heads are not in the game. And that's probably the communications and strategic piece that we have to deal with the most, is how to envision a pathway system that is meaningful for all students versus just students who are struggling. I would strongly suggest that we'd start looking about pathways as an umbrella concept, with have fine arts pathways, liberal arts pathways, technical pathways, not just limiting it to technical pathways, because then we fall into that college prep or career prep mindset, which has been around for decades. So I personally believe that that's the piece that we have to kind of take it to the next level of how do we create the understanding of a pathway system to engage every student, whether they're an academically high performer or not, so we get past this current kind of bifurcation.
I would want to add to that as well, because I think it's a great question, and I think for work-based programs to really become an educational staple, we need to look at the efficacy across all student types and all educational systems. And we need to look in the broader educational ecosystem. So it's not just about the one-way pipeline, it's also about the currency of our faculty as students come back and begin to push, because the tools or the way in which the business and industry is approaching their issues is different than what's being taught that may be 3 years or 4 years or 5 years old, which is an eternity in the information age. So I think the efficacy has to be thought of at all levels and then in the broader ecosystem.
I'm Dwight Armstrong with National FFA, and I'm just curious with your experiences with, you've talked about the workplace learning, and we've heard a lot about the academic side, but what's your experiences with your different groups as far as career technical student organizations and their role in helping encourage some of the things you're talking about?
Well, I'll be happy to comment on that. Sorry I'm talking so much. But anyway, there is no question when you really look at healthy student activities that have a kind of a co-curricular where what's happening after school is connected to what's happening during school. The leadership development activities that students get in those kind of activities, there's just a caliber of experience for students that it really is analogous to maybe better than, but at least as analogous as being in a sports team or a really good fine arts program. That when we think about students who are really ready to move on to college, technical training, and beyond, those student organization activities are incredibly valuable.
I'm sorry, but I feel compelled to weigh in on that. We stole a program from Alabama Power called Women of Distinction, and we picked some of our top female vice presidents to go over to witness that thing and be a part of it and see what it was about. And the interesting thing, you invite people to something like that, and I invited twice as many as I had seats. I had bought a table at the function, and 100% of those that I invited said, count me in, so I had to buy another table. That's a pretty good indication of the commitment of our salaried people, our top people, whether they be male or female. But at any rate, Women of Distinction we brought back and did that with our 12 for Life females. And we took them to a play, and we just did all kinds of things like that. They'd never seen inside. Carrollton is not exactly Boston, but we do have a little cultural arts center. That was taboo to them. They'd never seen inside that thing. And we got prom dresses and so on and so on. We even had our own prom with that. Well, then soon thereafter, the guy said, wait a minute, what about us? So now we do young professionals, and we do that once a year, and we bring in speakers who are very, very successful in various businesses. They may be physicians, they may be lawyers, they may be, one lady comes every year, and she runs an insurance agency, and she does rather well, and she can relate to those women. So we do tons of things, like we bring in police departments, we bring in fire departments, we bring in bankers, we associate these kids with something that they never, ever had an opportunity to talk with or be a part of. And that's a big piece of the development process, that we can go beyond what the normal school system can do.
Gretchen Cook with CompTIA. Grace, I just have a quick question for you. I'm a huge fan of PTech. And my question is, what's the funding model for the associate degree? Who pays for that?
PTech and Sarah Egood are both public school models, so they operate under public school funding. At PTech, our school partners have worked out an agreement where the funding is shared between the New York City Department of Education and the City University of New York. IBM is not paying for the associate's degrees.
So does that limit the scalability? I mean, are you going to be dependent on school systems where the post-secondary community colleges are willing to work with the local high schools to pay for that?
I think, rather than limiting the scalability, I think we have to think about these really siloed institutions and how to make them more permeable, whether it's working through an intermediary, which we don't have in New York. But those decisions are really challenging ones, and I think that's why I talked about the devil being in the details, because when the partners first align, the mission is something that we can all embrace. But when you talk about who's going to make the decision about, who gets to make the decisions about curriculum, some decisions are more clear-cut than others. IBM certainly is going to make a decision about curriculum, although we might have input into it. But when it comes to funding or overall authority of the school, these are things that should be worked out to a degree before a partnership like this comes together. Otherwise, you're going to be, 2 years down the road, and you're not going to know what degrees the students are going for, and you can't have an integrated curriculum, and you can't have a workplace learning strand that integrates with that academic curriculum.
Hi, Sapna Gupta with the Morrison Institute from Arizona State University. I wanted to pick up on this whole issue of scalability and the devil being in the details. So in terms of work-based learning, if you want to scale up district-wide, statewide, there's an issue of workplace insurance, minors at the workplace. Are you getting credit, academic credit for work-based learning? The question of funding, which is often based on students in seats. So I'd like to find out from all of you, what are some of the successful models? How are some of the ways to address these issues that can bog down, especially in a state where, for example, you have a lot of importance about local control. So I would love to hear some of your ideas and answers about this.
Sure, that's one of the challenges that we're running into in Wisconsin, because in Wisconsin we have a lot of pockets of excellence regionally that are very good, but how do you scale them up? One thing that we're attempting to do, and I'll go back to the second chance partner model, is that we just last Friday, will allow second chance partners to apply for the statewide youth apprenticeship grant program, which they had not been able to do this in the past. And I'm so impressed with this model. So now they will have access to be able to apply directly to the state of Wisconsin for our youth apprenticeship dollars. And we also allow them, through a memorandum of understanding, to be able to go and negotiate directly with school districts throughout the state of Wisconsin. They already have employers waiting throughout the state of Wisconsin that want to partner. So they're going to be the facilitator of these consortiums statewide. So they're going to be able to go and engage school districts statewide to be able to scale this up. And if they can add educational centers in other parts of the state, work with the school districts, I think we can move pretty rapidly to get second chance partners throughout the state of Wisconsin, increase the number of students, and the employers are already ready and step up to the plate. Another thing that we're encouraging, and I mentioned that the state just signed a piece of legislation called the Wisconsin Fast Forward legislation. We're going to be we'll be able to administer statewide grants to be able to incent best practices and best-in-class models to be able to go statewide. And through this incentive plan, we'll be able to try to generate some consistency and uniformity in terms of these pockets of excellence, and go out and talk about where this really works in southeastern Wisconsin and Racine County in Wisconsin. This will really work very well in St. Croix County and the northwest part of the state. There's nuances, of course, in individual counties and school districts, but the incentive's there. And also be able to go directly to employers that want to take some of these best-in-class models and have them in other places of the state and have them be able to, we'll be able to have the ability to match those efforts. In terms of policy and rules, we've attempted at Wisconsin to break down, burdensome rules that would prevent the ability of these best-in-class models to be able to scale up. So we've tried to streamline, the regulatory burden to allow dynamic programs to be able to go statewide. We view ourselves as a laboratory of innovation, and we want to continue to utilize that. So moving regulatory administrative rules, burdensome bureaucracy out the way that will prevent best-in-class models from being able to go in other parts of the state, creating incentives, monetary incentives, getting the word out. Another thing we're going to be doing is we're going to be spending a lot of time marketing and remarketing, rebranding our apprenticeship program. 1911, we've had apprenticeship in Wisconsin. Well, I think this is maybe getting a little stale. So this is an opportunity for us to rebrand it, to reshape it, to refocus it in a statewide model, to be able to talk to the millenniums and show how doing apprenticeship, you can go and buy a nice house and the car and those type of things and try to talk their language and get that information out there. And to young women as well. I can tell you how often I go into manufacturing settings and manufacturing floors and I see nothing but men. And women, these are viable opportunities for women too, the skilled trades and manufacturing jobs and careers. So being able to refocus our manufacturing, marketing efforts towards women to be able to generate and get that message out to women that these are great opportunities for young women to go into family-supporting middle-class jobs. So that's what we're going to be focused on in Wisconsin to try to increase the scalability of some of these best-in-class pockets of excellence in Wisconsin.
In the few remaining minutes, I would like to again go from Grace through the panel and give us a call to action. In your opinion, what's the most important thing we can do to create high-quality work-based learning opportunities for many young people?
It's hard to think of just one, but I think this issue of partnerships is really key. And how do you create a seamless integration between K-12, higher education, and business to give students the kinds of opportunities and supports and structures that they're going to need? Because there's not one entity that can do it alone. And so we have to make policy decisions and decisions as entities within and of ourselves to enable change and to communicate across the systems about what we need and be generous with both our time and expertise to enable innovation to come to the fore.
I guess I would raise the issue of investing in these programs, which I know this is the choir, but I think it's really key. We don't think about doing academic classroom-based education without faculty or teachers in the classroom. And many times I think these programs, particularly within the context of universities, are really at the margin and boutique, and it is really important that to really undertake this in a significant and substantial way and say this is going to be a part of our education overall, that we think about the kind of, in our case, we have co-op advisors, over 60. We have employer relations. We have databases which manage the employer relationship and the academic activity, the evaluation. It doesn't matter what the model is. It needs an infrastructure that is sustainable beyond the shifts in leadership and beyond the shifts in the person who's sort of carrying the torch within the institution. So I just think we need to think seriously about the right system and then scale as it relates to that system and make the tough choices within our organizations around investment and what's necessary for these young people to succeed.
It's been mentioned several times the critical nature of partnerships and real partnerships. That I'd have to say that's absolutely critical. 12 for Life has been adopted by the state of Georgia as the model for workforce development, and we, in conjunction with the Department of Community Affairs, have put together an organization called Great Promise Partners. You can find it on the Georgia State website. And it's another one of those things that's real. And when we talk about scalability, there's about 6 or 8 Twelve for Life-like operations in state government today, but there are 5 or 6 or 8 kids working primarily in an admin situation, primarily with one high school. But I heard some comments in various presentations today about how tough it is to work with state departments of education, and we just haven't had that problem. I don't know if we're lucky or what, but the state of Georgia, the state of Alabama, and now others are beginning to look at what we do, and it looks like it's an easy thing. So what do? What's the call to action? Stop talking, start chalking.
Amen. All right. So I guess what I would say is that a leadership entity at each regional level needs to step forward to convene the partners so that everybody isn't just kind of flailing around trying to reinvent the wheel. And then people from those leadership organizations need to network with other leaders around the country. Conferences are great, but they're once in a moon. I know our organization, NC3T, is creating a national professional learning community of those conveners so that you can have an ongoing dialogue and learning experience. So someone step forward to do that regional leadership work and then get connected with other like-minded leaders.
I would say that there is significant attention being drawn to this issue. My colleagues and other states, the workforce development agencies and Department of Labor agencies, this is all we talk about, dealing with this issue of developing pathways for young people to fill and deal with the emerging workforce needs of the future. I know that the leadership, I know individual governors are also focused on this attention. I know that there was some discussions about the National Governors Association. I know that they've been very focused on this, along with the National Association of State Workforce Agencies. So they're working in partnership, again, bipartisan partnership to deal with this issue of dealing with the skills gap and creating pathways for the future workforce needs. And I think that the focus is on it, and we just need to continue to have dialogue about these issues. And again, I could talk about what we're doing in Wisconsin. In Wisconsin, I know that Governor Walker is providing outstanding leadership, again, trying to break down and remove some of the barriers and that we do, and as a state, get out of the way and let these pockets of innovation move forward and get things done, and providing the incentives and support to be able to encourage it going forward.
There is information about the speakers in the speakers biography section of your binder, and a short background paper about work-based learning in the reading section. I'd like to thank the panelists for giving us really specific, concrete ideas, experiences, examples of the issues that we're facing, and please give them a round of applause. Thank you all for coming.